Welcome back to the third video in our series. Again, the goal of this video is to, or of this whole series, is to create a little GUI volunteer app where we can record volunteer information. In Java, so having like storing things like their first name, last name, their birthday, photos, phone numbers. In previous videos, what we did is we created a model class called volunteer that allows us to store information about our volunteers. So for each volunteer object that we create, we can keep track of their first name, last name, their phone number, their birthday, and we can keep track of an actual file object to show what the person looks like. But the problem with this is when we shut down our program, the data that's in it is gone. There's no persistent data. So the common way to store data is in something called a database. There are several very popular database programs out there, such as Oracle or Microsoft SQL. One of the most popular open source one is called MySQL. So that's the one that we're going to use. Now, in order to get your Java to be able to communicate with MySQL, you actually need to download a connector. So if we go in here and if we say MySQL, we'll do you can get the jar file. That's a great way of doing it. You can see the top one here. It's MySQL. Download the connector for J. That's for Java. So you can go in here and you can download these files. Inside of these files is actually a file that's called MySQL connector Java, whatever the latest release is, .bin.jar. So in my case, I've already downloaded that, so I'm not going to show it to you in this video, the actual download. But all we need to do is under libraries. So if I look at my library right now, we have the Java Development Kit. So I'm going to add this to my libraries. So I'm going to add this jar file. And again, it's MySQL connector Java, whatever the latest version is, -bin. And then although it's not showing me the actual extension here, it's actually .jar. You can see it down here in the file name. It's a .jar file. So I'm going to say open. And what this does is it allows my Java files or Java classes to communicate with MySQL server that's running on this machine. And then, so what we want to do is I want to be able to call a method that will write each volunteer into my database. So in order to do that, I need to create a database. So let me go into Workbench. So this isn't intended to be a course at all in databases, but if you're not familiar with MySQL or Workbench, it's basically a command line interface. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a database. So create database volunteer. And then I'm going to use that database. And then I'm going to create table volunteers. And in this table, you define each of the things that you want to store. So we're going to have first name, last name, phone number, birthday, and some kind of file for the image. And I'm also I want a unique way of identifying my volunteers. And the way that I'm going to do that is by assigning them a volunteer ID. So the first column I'm going to use is called volunteer ID. I'll make its data type an integer. It will not be null, meaning each volunteer must have an ID. And I will say that this auto increments. Every time a volunteer ID is given out, it will automatically it will automatically go to the next number, and then we'll say that it's the primary key, which forces it to be unique. And then we'll have first name. And I like to give these names the exact same as the names in our Java class. It just helps keep things really easy to remember. You don't have to flip between systems quite as much. And in database land, varchar, or variable length character set, is comparable to a string. So I'll say most people's first names are less than 30 characters. Same with their last names. What else do we need here? A phone number. And phone numbers, let's see, we have 10 digits plus a couple spacers. So we'll say it'll be less than 12. And then we've got the actual, we need to know where we're going to store this string that has the image file. Okay, so an image file, and this is going to be a string. Now we know that they're at least 32 characters long, plus whatever name the file originally had. That was in the previous video. So, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to say be under 100 characters. Should be more than enough. Oh, and the birthday. Now, in MySQL, they don't actually have a local date object, so we have to use date as the data type. So we're going to run in this file, or this command. And now I can select star from volunteers. We can see our table, although there's nothing defined in it just yet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into our model class, and we're going to create a method so that a volunteer knows how to write themselves to the database. So let's find some nice fresh space here. Okay, so public, nothing's going to be returned. I'm going to call the method insert into database. And for the database, we're going to need a few things. So one is we're going to have a connection. I'm going to initially make that null. And because we want to ensure that people are not trying to do a SQL injection attack, we're going to use a prepared statement to sanitize our inputs before we try to use them. I'm going to add some imports here. Okay, we've got a prepared statement. And then we're going to go down and we're going to try to run our command. And if things don't go wrong, we'll catch the exception. And we're going to use a finally block here to make sure that our database connection is closed. It would be a bit of a security leak to keep it open. So we're going to say if not equal to null, then we'll say prepared statement close. You can see what's happening here is there's a potential for a SQL exception to happen. So we'll just add a throws clause, and that'll put it right up here into this part of the method. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to actually do our database connection here. So in order to do that, we're going to say our connection equals we'll say driver connection, get connection, and then we have to we have to put in the destination of what we want. So it's JDBC, Java Database Controller, okay, and it's MySQL. And here we'll have localhost, right, because it's running on my local machine, port 3306. And then we put in the name of the database. So we called it what did we call it? Let's go back. Yeah, database is called volunteer. And then what we have to do is put in the username and password of our database. I made mine student. So the username is student. The password is student. You, of course, will have to set yours up whatever is appropriate. That's interesting. I don't normally need to do that. Well, hopefully that'll be okay. Don't normally need to cast it this way. Unless I've got the wrong imports up here. Let's take a quick gander. Why am I not seeing? It's saying this already exists, but I can't see it in here. There we go. I think I just had the wrong drivers to start. Okay. So we have our connection. And then what we need to do is we need to build a prepared statement. So step one here is connect to the database. Step two is create So normally our, shrink this down a little here. Okay, so normally we would have a command like insert into volunteers, and we would identify the specific columns that we want. So we're going to skip volunteer ID because it will auto-generate that for us. So we're going to say first name, last name, phone number, birthday, image file. And then we would say values. And then in here, we would normally have things like, oops. And then we have a phone number, so 555. And a birthday, so birthday, and then some file, something like this. Let's try that. And so that would insert, so we have Fred Flintstone as our first person, right? So we need to do the same thing in Java. So we'll just copy this. And in here, we'll have and then let's just put this in here. We'll say values. Here's what's interesting. This is interesting because what we don't do is we don't pass information directly into the database like we did here. If someone was trying to do something malicious, they could add in their first name is something like drop table volunteers, and potentially this thing could actually get run on the database. So what we do is we actually put in a question mark for each of these inputs. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 inputs. So I put in 5 question marks, 4, 5. Okay. That is the statement that we want to run. And then what we're going to do is we're going to prepare query. And the way that we do that is we need to sanitize those inputs. So we're going to say prepared statement. And if you've ever done anything like in PHP, this is a very common way of working. So we prepare the statement, we pass in the SQL. We have to convert the birthday to a local. Actually, I think. Birthday to a SQL date. So the first thing we're passing in from our instance of our object is the first name. And then the second thing we're passing in is going to be the last name. And then the phone number. So we also said that would be a string, so that's 3. Phone number. Then we have the birthday. So here, instead of saying set string, we're going to say set date. And it's position number 4. And you see how we're going to use BB here, right? The date object instead of the local date object. And the last thing is going to be a string for the file. And here, we're going to say image file. And we're going to get the name of it. Okay, so that will return the name of our file. And then all we have to do is we say prepared statement. execute update. And then it runs it on the database, catch any exceptions, and we close off our prepared statement, and we close the connection. Too many of these, perhaps. Okay, so let's go and test this out. So we'll change this from Fred to Wilma. Same phone number, and Wilma's a little younger, so give me a different birthday. All right, so here we're going to say volunteer dot, and we'll run the method insert into database. That throws a SQL exception, so we need to deal with that. So we'll add throw SQL exception. And if we run this, we should now have Wilma into our database. Oh, but seems like we had an issue with our volunteer age. She's too young. Okay, let's try that again. And if we run that, we see there's Wilma Flintstone, and we look in our database, and there we can see that sure enough, she has been added to our database, and we can see the actual name of the image file is prepended with a unique file name from our previous video. So there you have it. It's a quick connection to the database using prepared statements so that we can ensure we guard against SQL injection attacks. And in the next video, we're going to keep going down this path and build out our application. Thank you very much.